call to order the special meeting of the Glendale City Council. May we have roll call, please?
Yes, council members Assatrian. Here. Brotman.
Here.
Divine. Here. Najarian.
Here.
Mayor Kasakian.
Here. May we have your report, please?
The agenda for the Tuesday, March 7th, 2023 special public meeting of the City Council was posted on Wednesday, March 1st, 2023 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
All right, and may we have, three items before us. Let's go down the list. Let's first have the item number 1 read into the record.
Item number 1, community development regarding parklet design and installation for downtown Glendale and alfresco dining program guidelines for private parking lots. A, motion approving parklet design for downtown Glendale. B, resolution to dispense with competitive bidding and authorizing the purchasing administrator to issue a purchase order service authorization in an amount not to exceed $400,000 with VX Design Solutions for the fabrication and installation of parklets in downtown Glendale. C, motion providing staff direction regarding alfresco dining program for private parking lots. D, resolution of appropriation in the amount of $146,000.
All right, Mr. Galanian?
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor Kasakian, member of City Council. This item, as it was read into the record, is related to alfresco dining and parklet design. As you know, during the pandemic, staff initiated the alfresco dining, outdoor dining program on a temporary basis due to the restrictions on indoor dining in restaurants. And it turned out to be extremely successful, and hence council directed staff to turn this program into a more of a permanent long-term strategy. And last year, I believe in the Montrose Shopping Park, our CDD department, and in collaboration with Public Works, were able to install more of a permanent parklet installations that have proven to be very popular. And as such, staff will be presenting design alternatives for parklet designs in the downtown Glendale area, and requesting to dispense with competitive bidding and hire a vendor directly to fabricate and install these parklets. Also, staff will be seeking direction on the use of private parking lots. Again, because of the pandemic and restrictions on interior inside dining at restaurants, some of our restaurants and bars had expanded their seating area into private parking lots to be able to manage their clients. So as such, again, we'll be seeking direction as to the future of the use of these private parking lots as we move forward. With that, I turn it over to Bradley Calvert, our Director of Community Development, to present this item for your consideration.
Thank you. Good evening, or good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. As acknowledged, the alfresco program, both within our public right-of-way and within private parking lots, has proven to be extremely successful. Last year, we were able to get the installations completed in the Montrose neighborhood. Today, we are returning with, for your review, the locations for downtown and the designs that go along with that. And as acknowledged, we're also looking for some input and direction regarding the fees and how we move forward with the parking lot, the private parking lot installations that are there. Another element here that we're also requesting is to allow the existing locations that are not going to be changed in downtown with the permanent solution to remain in place until we can strategize essentially what we would consider to be around a phase 2 approach, so that we could complete the other locations as well. Costs have been rising in terms of the development of these parklets. So being able to include all of the existing locations right now is not feasible with the current funding, so we would need to identify potentially other partners or other means to achieve phase 2. So we would be asking to keep those locations in place in the meantime, using the existing K-rails that we do have. So the proposed design, what you'll notice in the packet and the exhibit that was provided to council, it looks like there are 2 installations. There are actually really more than 2. There's 2 physical locations, but one of the locations is actually intended to serve several different restaurants. So while it is 1 physical installation, it will be assisting several of those restaurants along that corridor, and then there's a secondary, smaller installation that would be going in place as well. So this is a plan of the larger installation. As you can see, this is really intended to serve somewhere between 2 and 4 businesses, about 6 to 7 tables per location. If we were to, there we go. If we look at this from an aerial perspective, you can see that the base of these is very similar to what was proposed and ultimately completed in Montrose. You see kind of this wooden framework. There's some opportunities to incorporate some vegetation. Now, given the nature of Brand Boulevard, noticing that it is different from Honolulu, Honolulu being a 2-lane bidirectional street, Brand having 4 lanes, in some cases 5 when turn lanes are incorporated. The design team has actually recommended to include some kind of physical barriers essentially to help both with sound and just overall comfort for those that would be sitting in these installations. So what they've done is they've taken essentially the pattern that has been painted onto the existing K-rails, and it's kind of a plexiglass screen that you can see that separates patrons from the moving traffic. That pattern is really kind of based off of what we already have on those current K-rails. This would also include a form of overhead weather protection. This is largely around, from the perspective of trying to block out some sunlight where feasible. So as part of these designs and as we conclude this presentation, we'll be looking for feedback from City Council on this. We know there may be some considerations along the lines of color, maybe some other interpretive ways to provide overhead weather protections, and those are all things that we can give back to our design team and they can refine. Just an example from the street level view, really the kind of, again, the color is kind of based off of what is there, some feedback from some of our stakeholder groups as well. We have presented these to the GDGA, to the businesses as well in terms of kind of the color scheme and then the overall design. This is a plan for one of the smaller installations. This is what a kind of standalone servicing just 1 business would look like. Obviously, this one is a much smaller installation, but still kind of the same configuration, still some of the same design language and elements. And then looking there from the street level. Again, the ability here to incorporate essentially some planters within those walls rather than just having kind of a narrow wall that separates, which is kind of what we have in Montrose now. The idea here was to incorporate some green landscaping elements into that design. So as part of that, we would need to dispense with competitive bidding. This would be the same company, same contractor that installed our Montrose locations. This would be for a purchase order of about $400, or not to exceed $400,000. We still have some existing Measure S COVID recovery funding that we would need to move into this. Again, costs have gone up significantly for these, so we need to kind of backfill that gap. Regarding fees, we would reinstate the sidewalk dining fees. There's a $224 permit fee and then $2.24 for every square feet. The cost of the parking revenue that would be lost for these is estimated about 15 spaces for $115,000 over the course of any given year. Therefore, each parking space would be about $7,700 for the restaurant, the business to pay in order to have this. We have proposed that can be paid over a monthly basis with those businesses. Originally, we were anticipating that we may have to have a conversation regarding the fees around Montrose. After further review this morning, we feel that those still are in line. Right now, that's about $4,500 per parking space. Those vendors, those businesses are already aware of that. We were considering potentially lowering that cost, but we do now, after kind of looking at that and making sure that we have a full cost recovery on our parking revenue, feel that that is still a viable fee to charge. As part of that, we would also ask that we continue the existing installations with the K-rails, those that will not be receiving these new kind of long-term permanent implementations, to be extended right now until December 31st of 2023. Again, as we try to identify how can we move forward with the second phase. We will continue to work with those stakeholder working groups as we figure out how to roll that out, and also in response to any of the comments we may receive from City Council regarding the design of these. Another major point of today's conversation is how do we address the outdoor dining within existing parking lots. This has also proven to be a very popular strategy in response to COVID, but also recognizing that this is how people do enjoy spending time in our restaurants. They do enjoy these outdoor opportunities that maybe didn't exist before. What we are proposing is that we continue to work with these existing restaurants, and what we would like to do is have them go through a full entitlement process. One of the main reasons behind that is to make sure that they are complying with any building and safety requirements, any ADA and accessibility issues that would need to be addressed, and then ultimately to make sure that their installations are not negatively impacting parking. We have not heard very many complaints about that through all of the existing locations now. But we would ask that the restaurant does demonstrate by some means, whether that be through a parking study or ultimately a parking exception, to be able to keep that location there. It may need to be scaled down if any studies indicate that more parking needs to return. Some may not always be eligible for this as well as we go through that process. So as part of phase one, we would work with those existing restaurants that have already applied for outdoor dining and identify what improvements that they would need to make with those existing installations and what they would need to demonstrate to the city to ensure that we do not have an issue when it comes to parking capacity or parking spilling over into any adjacent businesses or neighborhoods. So those are the primary elements that we're seeking feedback from the city council from. An alternative one, that is really to approve the design or provide feedback regarding the downtown parklets and to dispense with that competitive bidding, provide any direction as it may relate to any of those private parking lot installations, and to approve the fees for downtown, which is $7,700 per year per parking space. Alternative two would be to reject any of these. At that point, the alfresco program will be terminated, our K-rails would come out, and then alternative three, council may consider any other alternative not proposed by staff. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Calvert. Who has questions for Mr. Calvert? Councilmember Brotman.
A few questions. Okay, so you're saying 7,700 per space per year on Brand, but you're saying Montrose is 4,500?
Correct. Montrose is at 4,500.
And why the difference? Is it because of the value of the parking and the revenues that we pull in the different locations? Or?
Correct. The revenue that we get from there is different. The charge for the parking rates is also lower. There's not as much turnover as well. Through Public Works and their evaluation, each one of those parking spaces produces about $4,500 per year in revenue.
Okay. And that 7,700 per year per space, does that fully recover that 100,
Correct.
whatever that loss of revenue is?
That is correct.
It's basically designed as a break even?
Correct.
Okay. And you said there are going to be how many restaurants are going to be able to take advantage of these?
Under the current, or with the current proposal, or with
with
phase two?
Well, no, phase one, what we're,
5. So the larger installation would include 4 restaurants, and then there would be the one smaller installation further south.
and are those the restaurants that are just immediately opposite, or are there some other, like what are those restaurants? Can you tell us? Do
The
you know?
4 would be located along, actually, Alan, could you provide that information?
And they all want to do this, right?
Correct.
Okay, okay. And do they know this cost, and they're all okay with this cost? Have we discussed that with them?
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. The 5 restaurants is the,
Alan, can you introduce yourself, please?
sorry, Alan Castillo, Principal Development Officer for Community Development. So to answer your question, the 5 restaurants are just north of Carousel. It's the Hot Wings Cafe, the pho restaurant, the sushi, the Korean barbecue, and the Indian restaurant. And then the one smaller one is the one right in front of Tavern on Brand.
Okay, and they all know this fee that they're going to be paying,
Correct.
and no problem?
We have not had any concerns expressed thus far.
Okay. Do you want to take that first topic first? Because I have questions about the second, but I think it would be cleaner. Okay.
So this is just on the existing parklet areas, converting them into the designs that were proposed. Do my colleagues, any other colleagues have questions regarding this? Okay. Councilmember Najarian.
Are they all going to be uniform in design and color?
Correct. That is the intent behind that, similar to what we did in Montrose.
Are we going to permit any of the adjacent restaurants to customize that space in any way?
We
with
do not
lights?
have that accommodated as part of this. Again, the idea behind it was uniformity, and also so that we wouldn't have some of the issues that we had with some of the outdoor dining. People would, some restaurants would put their own individual umbrellas, different colors, different heights, different sizes. It tended to not be as aesthetically attractive.
Well, I agree, but they somehow get along. Well, I've seen that there have been several attempts to string lights for one, and
So some of that would be incorporated into that design.
will there be any signage permitted on the plexiglass? Is it going to be plexiglass between? So will there be any signage?
No,
that a
there would be no
restaurant can-
signage. There's actually a pattern kind of engraved or applied to that that's very similar to what we have on the current K-rails.
Okay. And do we have rules for these? Is is one restaurant allocated a certain number of tables? Is it free, is it open seating for everyone? Because I've seen some fights around the hot wings and the Indian food, and there was another restaurant there. It's like, hey, get off my thing. Well, that's not yours. This is the city's. I can seat my customers here. No, you can't, So do we have any rules in that regard?
So that larger installation intended to accommodate the 4 restaurants, there would actually be a physical barrier separating, a divider that would be created so that each one of those would be designated for that specific restaurant.
Okay. Does, and I'm not sure if I'm going further than where you were thinking of going, but how about cleanup? We have any cleanup rules for that? Because I've seen, at one of the more popular bars that used to be a billiard hall in that, well, that's actually south of the Hot Wings and just north of the Alex. It's been left quite a mess in that parklet area. Do we have rules on that? Are we leaving that up to our ambassadors, our brand ambassadors from DGA to clean? Or what's our deal with that?
No, part of the contractual obligation would be for the restaurants, they would have to maintain that. DGA obviously does participate in some of that cleanup that occurs, but the restaurants would be primarily responsible for that.
Okay. And our no smoking policy continues?
Correct.
You can't make the argument that I've got now so many 1,000-square-foot patio that entitles me to smoking under our smoking ordinance. So many feet away from the entrance. I mean, you could probably, if someone is smart, they could measure it out with plus with the dividers that are in there, they could probably make an argument that smoking is permitted. But are we setting a strict requirement that there's no smoking, or do we let them look at our existing no smoking ordinance and let them nuance the distances between the front door, the barriers, et cetera? Let's look into that if we haven't quite done that. And the furniture that is used out there, is the city supplying that? The tables and chairs, or is that?
Yeah, we're still using the existing furniture. That was actually similar to what we did in Montrose. During the construction installation, we went out there, put that in storage temporarily, and then brought that back out.
Okay. So by the pictures there, it looks like we're doing away with the umbrellas, the sun umbrellas that we used to have.
Correct. That's the intent behind kind of the hard ceiling that's there.
Okay.
So again, we have the uniformity. In Montrose, we employed sails in that regard.
Okay. Are fire sprinklers required for that?
No, this is not fully enclosed, so they would not be needed.
Okay. Because we're tough on those regulations. Make sure we don't fall into a trap on that. Thank you. Those are just some of the thoughts I had.
Councilmember Devine?
Yeah, I was mostly concerned that making sure that the restaurants are okay with that fee, that $7,700. I'm glad that Councilmember Brotman asked about that. Other really good questions. My objection is the design, the colors, the white, the linear, cold. It looks like a float or a barge. And I just don't think it's aesthetically pleasing to see that on brand. I think maybe, I guess, when you mentioned the pattern on the K-rails, I never did like those patterns. I thought they were awful, and now you've replicated those, and I think that's another reason why I'm not really keen on this design. So I'll just say that. And I was suggesting that, maybe change the colors or something, and maybe instead of the blues, maybe use green so it looks like trees or greenery instead of those, I don't know what they're called. My other question is about carousel. That is not included in this first design, this first phase?
Correct. They're not currently using a parklet. They have a sidewalk dining permit at this point. We do know that there's been some concerns about the widths that, the path of travel. They do meet the minimum requirements, but we are going to work with them to modify that. We know that's been an issue with a couple places up and down Brand. We do believe that some of the parklets are going to resolve some of those issues. In that instance, we're going to work with them to make that more amenable for pedestrians and those who are waiting at that bus stop.
Okay, and for phase 2, you already have restaurants lined up and they're willing to pay the $7,700?
Before we move any further with a phase 2, we would ensure that their participation and they agree to the terms.
Okay. All right, that's basically my comments. Thank you.
We're doing questions mostly.
Because I have comments,
Yeah,
but
comments. And I also have one card from the public that I wanted to consider, and there's two parts to this. One is these proposed parklet upgrades, we'll call them, and then the other is what to do with the outdoor dining areas on private property and the private parking lots. So Councilmember Al-Satrian?
I have a couple questions.
Go ahead.
I think following up on Councilmember Najarian's, could we designate the number of tables for each restaurant? Could we come up with a manual so we don't then have it be that, we're picking and choosing and there's disagreements between the restaurants of number of chairs and tables that they get? Is this something that we could come up with as a city?
Well, the contract will state that that particular amount of square footage within that larger one belongs to them. And then that space itself only holds so many tables in terms of capacity, which we have identified as 6. Again, there will be a barrier that separates that larger one will essentially be broken into quarters, and there will be 4 different locations, each of those assigned to specific restaurants.
And it couldn't be the case that one of the restaurants decides to pay double and then ends up with double the tables?
No. I mean,
Right, yeah, okay.
unless that was agreed upon between the 2 restaurants. If a restaurant decided they didn't want to use it anymore and turn over the rights to somebody else, we would deal with it at that point, but they would have that option.
The rest are comments, so thank you.
Okay,
I have one question again.
go ahead, Councilmember Najarian.
How are we going to deal with heaters? Are we going to let them bring portable heaters?
Good question.
Sometimes they get close to that fabric. We may have a fire issue.
No, it would not be allowed in that case,
You
because
say
you would,
absolutely.
your ceiling height essentially would be too low for that.
About some of the lower heat, they've got new styles now. I don't know if you've seen they're about 5 feet high, glass enclosed. Anyway, I think that's something that I'm going to leave to staff and fire safety to work out, but just make sure we don't cause any fires with melting polypropylene plastic on the diners, and we get sued. So I leave that to your able staff and yourself to work out and make sure it's reasonable, whatever you do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So on the look and how the parklets are proposed, my concern or questions I have, and again, I know that there's going to be things that we cannot foresee and will become issues, and then hopefully we'll figure out ways to address them. But in terms of the way well, that's interesting. Was this something you guys wanted to show, or is this? That's here? Oh, okay, all right, well. So one of the things that I would like to have us consider is how clean we can keep these structures. I noticed that there was a lot of white, and I know white can appear pretty, dirty quickly. But apart from that, my question is, how do you propose to maintain the rooftops where we may have trees that may drop? I don't even know what we would call them, but we've had issues in the past with trees along Brand that have either berries or whatever else that they drop. I don't know what the type of trees we have. How we're going to keep those clean. or off those roofs? Is there a plan to just scrub them, wash them?
We would have routine maintenance and care to them. In fact, in the forthcoming year's budget, we will be asking for a small allocation that will allow us an annual amount every year to be able to maintain both these downtown locations as well as the Montrose locations.
Okay. All right, I don't have any other questions. My colleagues asked some very good questions, so that leaves me with only that one thing I needed clarification on.
Could I,
Do you want?
just
do you
a
have question?
comment on this before we move on to
Okay,
the
well,
next
let's move to
thing.
comments, and then after that, we'll hear from Mr. Meek.
I know this came up already, but the issue with Tavern on Brand, and I've talked to you, Mr. Keller, about this, the Tavern on Brand, the tables in the middle of the sidewalk, and then also with Carousel. I just think this has been going on for ages, and, well, at least I know the Carousel one, and it's just such an encroachment on the public right-of-way. I don't care that it's technically wide enough. I mean, if you try to get through there, you end up, kind of trying to get around that bus stop, and there are people there, and it's really terrible. So I know it's not directly connected to this, but I'd like to see those two situations get resolved before we finalize all this. We really need to clean that up. That's just a comment. Otherwise, I'm happy we're doing this, and I'm happy that I'm looking forward to that phase 2, because I really hope we do the rest of them as well.
All right. Go ahead.
All right. So
Well, we'll do our comments, and then we'll hear from Mr. Meek.
I don't love the design. I would love to see something where we get rid of all that metal, and if there's potentially a different way for us, whether it's uniform umbrellas when we need to cover, or however you guys want to come up with, but I think there's way too much metal in the design. I'd love to see something that's kind of covered in hedges and tall plants, especially facing the street. It's usually not pleasant to be sitting on that edge when cars are driving by. So having something that's both green and covers up that passing car would be nice. I do love seeing the hanging lights at night with the current structure that we have, so I don't know if that could be incorporated. The wood, I don't know the quality of the wood, if we are going to move forward with having wood, but I know that the ones in Montrose that were built some years ago have brick. Can you speak to that on like maintenance and what would stay longer without us having to constantly invest in upkeep?
I believe this current proposal is actually calling for a composite material, which would be more durable than just standard wood. Obviously, any recommendations to modifying these materials, we can take back to that design team if there's something that would work better. The foundation and the floor of these they're actually going to be of a concrete material, and that's the location that's going to take kind of the hardest wear and tear. So we are confident that will last for a while.
I know our clerk had put it up for a second, but here's a design that was submitted some like 2015, for example. They weren't able to go through with it back then, but I kind of like something like this and more modern that also works with our downtown versus the wood and metal you have currently. Maybe you want to take, obviously not this, but if you want to take inspiration from that. But I really don't like the colors, and then I think one of your proposed designs has these metal parts to enter. It would be nice to have something that's more open, so just open and green, and I'm talking about this one.
We do have to have some barriers there because of ABC rules, because you are separated from the public right away. So we do have to have some sort of separation there between the tables and the sidewalk. We can have them look at something that may be better designed, if you will, but we will have to have some sort of separation. If you look at the Montrose, for example, they actually do have walls that still extend out.
Okay. That's all I have, but
Okay.
thank you.
Councilmember Devine, did you have comments on
No,
this
I
item?
think I've made mine.
Okay, Councilmember Najarian? All right, so I'll just, I'll briefly say that I like what happened in Montrose, where the current replacements are a significant improvement over what was there before. In terms of the monies collected, I do hope that you have communicated with the Montrose Shopping Park Association as to what their understanding and expectations are regarding that, and that we have a clear understanding of the expectations for payment to the city with the current proposed areas and the restaurants that'll be using them. So as long as everyone is on the same page and understands where the money goes, what it is used for, and we tell them this is why you're being charged this, I think it's important for us to recoup some of the lost revenue that we would have had from those spaces. I know in Montrose, for instance, the expectation was for that to go into some type of Montrose parking fund or fund that would benefit parking in the Montrose area. So I hope that those discussions are happening where you're explaining to the folks in the shopping park what those funds will be used for. In terms of the look of these, I'm okay with them. The string lights are nice as long as there's enough of them where it looks like it's well lit in the evenings. And the wooden slat look, which is, I guess, some have called it recently the hipster or the gentrification fence type look, is fine by me. But I do worry about the amount of metal and the roofs, and if there's anything that can be done to either make it look a little bit more inviting, keeping in mind that in some of those places on the side of the street where these are proposed, they will be also receiving some direct sunlight in the evening hours when most people will be frequenting these places. It's a lot to consider, but I'm not a design expert. Hopefully, your team will take that into consideration. But in terms of how they look, I think that whatever is proposed will be a significant improvement over the K-rails and some of the places we have. To end on a positive note, what I like the most about it is the incorporation of plants and greening those spaces. I think that helps significantly. And again, I think this is just trying to strike a somewhat of a decent compromise, given that a lot of these people will be sitting right next to where cars will be driving by at considerable speeds. You know, it's not for everyone, but for those who it is for, I'm sure it'll provide enjoyment. As far as, by the way, the carousel issue, I just do want to say, Councilmember Brotman, I understand and I share your concerns about public right-of-way. We want to make our sidewalks as inviting as possible, but the issue hasn't been ongoing for as long as we may feel. I know it feels like forever, but I know that Carousel, which has been a good partner with the city, has been a very, very important business here in the city. They took those portions of the sidewalk in part to make up for what they were going to lose in terms of patronage to their inside space, indoor space during COVID. I know that they had actually approached the city about using or having an area in the back parking lot, which never was able to take off the ground. So hopefully moving forward here, we can find a way, and I trust that staff will, where we can give them the space that they need out front with the sidewalk dining permit, which is not part of this, but also allow for people to traverse that area without any impediments. I know the location of the bus stop has also been brought into question, and staff has said that they can't move the bus stop, that it is not easy to move to either one block below or further up. I'll take staff at their word, but I also want us to take into consideration that the Carousel Restaurant has been a good partner, has been a very popular business here in the city, and we should work with them to find a happy solution that also doesn't impact our pedestrians walking up and down Brand. So those are my comments. I will I'm supportive of these designs, but if there's a desire from my colleagues to modify them or change them, we can have that discussion right before we vote. But before we do that, let's hear from Mr. Stephen Meek. Mr. Meek, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for letting me speak for a moment. I'll be very quick. I do believe the pedestrians should have a right-of-way on the sidewalks. Mr. Calvert said that, carousel is meeting the minimum. I'm not sure what that minimum is, but I would like that possibly be expanded slightly, because some of the places that you walk down Brand is very difficult, especially if people are walking both directions. I would like to see a little better design, possibly do a request from local artists to see if we could get something that will satisfy the shade requirements and still be better to look at to make Glendale an arts city. I know staff has looked into this, but it wasn't mentioned that, as far as I can tell, about the safety in case there is a car accident that hits one of these parklets. Is it safe and will protect the patrons that are sitting there? And that's all I had to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Meek. So with that, we have a couple of, do we have any callers on this item?
We don't.
Okay, so with that, let's take on the first portion of this, if that's possible to do. Ms. Van Meiden, we can entertain a vote on this and then discuss the issue of the private parking lots, correct? Okay,
Mayor,
Councilmember Al Sadrian?
it seemed like we all had similar comments with the
Okay.
modification, and if I may, direct staff to make the modifications based on the comments that we made and approve.
My only issue with that, Councilmember Al Sadrian, is that everyone had issues with the proposed design, but I didn't hear any consensus as to what we would like instead. So where would we go in a situation like that?
If I could summarize some of the comments that I've heard thus far, and if council will give you feedback, if that's majority
Sure.
agreement, but reducing the amount of metal that is used, potentially something that is not so, having it be more open air, if you will, incorporating elements of light, but it doesn't need to be kind of a solid surface that is over the top, and some feedback regarding the actual color and incorporating more vegetation.
Is that in line with what
Yeah,
was?
can I add one? Because there was a good point about being conscious of late-day sun, or however the sun comes in, and making sure that we have a design that maybe we have to move umbrellas, or however we design it to make it palatable on those summer afternoons.
Well, just, I guess my comments were about the design as well, and just maybe do away with the white color and maybe make it a little softer, not as edgy. Just kind of, we're doing this to enhance our downtown. Mr. Meek made a good comment. Maybe we have an artist out there who's willing to submit a design for the plexiglass instead of the blue and white design that's being proposed. But just kind of soften it up so it's more inviting, and it doesn't look so kind of float-like or barge-like. You go up to Montrose and it's, all that wood and the sails and stuff. It just, it's inviting. It's inviting. This, to me, is not inviting. This is cold and a bit harsh. So those are my comments on the design.
Mr. Mayor, based on council's comments, it appears that we may have to return to council with some design options at a later date for your consideration and approval.
Turn for redesign. How do you like that?
There you go.
How do you like that?
Would become the design.
Now you know how everyone else feels.
So let me,
Do we need an EIR on this?
no, so it's not that time of the day, Councilmember Najarian. Hold your powder. So I would say that my question would be to our legal counsel and to the city manager and staff. Does this mean that we do not approve the appropriation for the dispensing with competitive bid and to VX Design? Or do we move forward with that, allow them to come back or bring us back some new designs? What is it that would be the preferred method of doing this?
I would say, Mr. Mayor, Mayor City Council, not to approve any of these requests, since the design would dictate the cost and hence the necessary appropriation. It may be lower or higher, depending on what design element you select.
All right, well, Councilmember Devine?
Yeah, I have a question. How long do you suppose that will take? I mean, I hate to postpone and, we want to get this on, started. How long, Mr. Calvert?
We would need to talk to the design team. Part of the challenge would be scheduling the actual contractor to come out here. So we would not want to kind of extend this part of the process out too much longer. So hopefully we could come back within a matter of 4 weeks or so and get feedback on some other alternatives or a refined design.
Okay, quicker the better. Thank you.
Yes, but
Yeah.
however, I need to add that if it's council's intention or direction to commission members of the public to come up with a design, that's going to take quite a while.
But I don't think we need to do that.
And I would say we're already under a contract currently with the design team for these
I'm
as
fine
well.
with that.
Okay, so on this item, no action, you have some feedback, we'll wait for it to return. Let's move on to the next portion of this item, which is what to do with the parking in the private parking lots that have been converted to dining. Anything that any council members would like to ask or comment on?
Yes.
Go ahead, Councilmember Brown.
Well, more of a comment. Well, first of all, a question, because I asked this in the briefing. The restaurants that we're talking about here that have done this, I think you said there are only a handful. I know of 3, I can think of 3, but do we have a list of who they are, how many there are?
We do. Currently, we have 10 locations, but not all of them will be moving forward and keeping this as a permanent. We estimate somewhere around 7 or so, maybe 8 would actually keep it permanent.
And the others wouldn't because they don't want to?
Correct.
I see. Okay. I mean, my only comment here is I really want to see, I want to see us able to keep these. And I'm a little worried that, we go through this parking analysis and then we've got a bunch of, rigid parking rules, and it turns out that, somebody's being told they have to pull out their installation. And I don't want to be blindsided. I definitely want to know about that before any action is taken. I don't want to get a call from somebody or an email from one of the restaurants saying, hey, what's going on? We're being told we need to pull this out. So is there a mechanism where I understand going through code, I understand doing the parking analysis, but make sure that we get fair warning so that we can maybe take some action if there's an outcome that we're not happy with?
So there actually be a couple options here. As we mentioned, we would need some sort of parking analysis or study, maybe a parking exception. There are also some state rules and state legislation that have gone forward regarding parking in commercial spaces that could allow another alternative path. Regardless, if we do find ourselves in a position where somebody is not meeting the minimum requirements, again, we find that to be highly unlikely. That is something we could bring back for a discussion.
Okay, that's what I would ask for, and that we don't make this too burdensome on the restaurants. I know parking studies, I don't know, they could be expensive and complicated. Let's, as much as possible, let's keep this simple.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
Councilmember Najarian and then Councilmember Devine.
So before I weigh in on something that may have, turned into an entitlement, I'd like to know, maybe I missed it, I'd like to know who these restaurant owners are, so I don't have any conflict with,
Right.
I'm only 8 months out of the last election. So who are they? Who are we talking about? Just so I know.
The current locations right now that have installations are the Glen Arden Club, G Lounge, Toasted Bun, King's Kitchen, El Sol Restaurant, Crab Avenue, We're Pouring, San Fernando Bar, Old Gimri, and Level Cafe.
Can you repeat those slowly?
Yeah,
again?
that was a lot, and that was fast. We're trying to take notes.
Glen Arden Club, G Lounge, Toasted Bun, King's Kitchen, El Sol Restaurant, Crab Avenue, We're Pouring, San Fernando Bar, Old Gimri, and Level Cafe.
Okay.
I don't know if I got anything.
And Pardis.
And parties, that's right.
Correct, actually, yes, that is, yes, actually missing from this list.
Sold toasted.
At least those are the ones we know of, right? So, Councilmember Devine?
Okay, I have, in the process that you're talking about, and you're talking about parking issues, and what about noise issues? I was kind of surprised when you said we've had no issues with noise or parking or with any of these, and I'm getting emails all the time about that.
For clarity purposes, what I was referencing earlier is we're having limited challenges when it comes to parking. We are aware that there are some challenges with some that have valet service and how that space is being used. That is independent of this actual outdoor dining program. Noise, yes, we are aware of complaints. Any business that were to have one of these installations still has to abide by our noise ordinance, our rules and regulations. Otherwise, they are subject to enforcement.
Okay, and another thing that I would like to see is if a restaurant is going, are going to use their parking lot for outdoor dining, that there be some sort of buffer zone between that parking space or parking, lot where they're converting, and apartments or residential in that area. Because I think that's where we're getting into trouble, is when they use, restaurant uses a parking lot and it's right next to apartment building. And we're getting, some complaints on that. So I would like to see that put into this, this ordinance, however when you develop it, that there has to be some kind of buffer zone. I don't know if it's going to be distance, a wall, or what, but there has to be some protection for the residents that live in that area, so that we don't come into a problem of noise. I think parking's going to be a problem probably in every one of them, but I think at least the noise we should be able to handle.
Okay, Councilmember Asadrian?
This is for our city attorney. I think I may have gotten a donation from Glen Arden Club. Would that stop me from making comments on this issue?
Are you within 500 feet of?
No, it's campaign.
Campaign contribution.
Campaign contribution, oh, I see. Yes, and because the direction would be for purposes of developing rules and procedures, and essentially that would allow these facilities to appreciate a benefit as a consequence of the direction given here today, whether that is through a zoning ordinance or other regulations that we adopt as part of our code. So based on what you've indicated to me, I would say that there is would be a conflict.
At least until June of this year, then the
Yes.
12-month period
Yeah,
would
the
be.
12-month, during the 12-month period, depending on the direction that's given here.
Okay. So you would have to recuse yourself.
I will be recusing myself.
Thank you for asking.
If that applies to anyone else, they would have to as well if it's within a 12-month period. All right, so on this particular item, who else would like to comment? No? All right. My concern is regarding, it's not that I don't like the fact that these outdoor spaces are being used in a way that's beneficial to the patrons and people who are frequenting our restaurants. Obviously, that's an economic benefit to the city as a whole. My concern is that, how long do we allow it to happen? I don't feel that it's wise to allow it in perpetuity. And so I'm fine with allowing this to continue at least for another 12 months or so, because initially that was our reasoning, right? These spaces were allowed to open because, the health department, the state, the county, everyone said no more indoor dining. And so we had to allow restaurants to survive somehow, and we allowed them to take over large, entire portions of their parking lots. In some areas, it hasn't had much of an impact on the parking for patrons and other individuals. In other areas, it has. In some areas, it caused some concerns and complaints by neighbors, and others it hasn't. So on a case-by-case basis, and I think for a period of time, I'm fine with allowing this to continue, but I don't feel comfortable going beyond. I would like to revisit this after a year to see where we're at. I don't want to just simply give everyone a, carte blanche and say, okay, you no longer have to provide parking, or you can use your entire area that was intended for parking, both for your employees and for patrons, to be used for dining. So that's where I'm at. Councilmember Brotman?
Yeah, I just want to comment on that because I thought that was the reason we're doing a parking study. If we're going to make them go through a parking study and then we're going to say this is only for a year, then we should just kind of say status quo for a year. But if we're going to go through a parking study, basically what we're going to conclude is that there isn't a serious problem. So I think it's like an either or, right? Mr. City Manager, what do you think?
Yes, Mayor Kasakian, member of City Council. Parking study, as was noted, it can be costly. It's going to take a while. And the purpose is to prove to staff and the city that there is sufficient parking in and around that area, be it a valet parking or off-site parking that they can utilize. With that document in hand, then we can approve parking exemption, like Mr. Calvert mentioned. What we have done thus far is put the enforcement on hold and not enforce the parking requirements. If that's the intention, we can continue that, but it is an either or.
If I may, Mayor and council members, I do hear a couple of concerns that are there about performance, such as noise. If this becomes an issue down the road, is that we could actually treat this something similar to how we do our CUPs, is that there could be some sort of time horizon on there and we reevaluate whether or not that can be allowed to continue if new issues start to arise. We do this with other uses. Sometimes you have to renew on a 2, 3, 5-year basis, so we could do something along those lines. Regarding the questions, comments regarding noise, impacts to surrounding neighborhoods, we can put some sort of buffer in there, those that are near residential uses, that can be either through sound attenuation or distance. We do have a means in terms of sound attenuation that could be applied to that, and then have some sort of maximum level of legitimate and verified complaints that if they are achieved or they reach that level, that number of complaints, that this could all be pulled back from them and they would no longer be allowed to have that. If they do continue to be a nuisance. We could put those kind of thresholds in there for both of those elements.
Yes, and in addition to that, if the application for amplified sound is approved, it comes with limitations and restrictions, up to a certain hour, up to certain decibels, et cetera.
And enforcement?
Correct. I mean, we have our neighborhood services and police who can respond. And when I say a verified complaint, that way we know that it was an actual issue that was responded to and identified by either our neighborhood services team or police as a legitimate issue. And we can put a threshold on that. After a certain number, if they continue to violate, we could pull that approval back.
Just give me an estimate of a threshold of what you think, 3 calls, 4 calls, 10 calls?
I would leave that to the determination of the city council and how often being that kind of nuisance would be allowed.
Okay. Councilmember Najarian?
Well, I like your idea of letting it go for a year, but then terminating the program, sunsetting it, I guess. I mean, rules are rules. I think a lot of these were done without anyone's permission. They just went and expanded. It was tough during COVID, but those COVID restrictions are gone. No one is requiring limitations on indoor eating. I wouldn't want to give them a waiver or an abatement on enforcement if they have other issues, code enforcement issues in the books. Some of these places maybe do. So it would be you clean up these other things, or this one-year extension doesn't apply to you. I wouldn't want any extension of the square footage that is, you know how it is. You tell them you got another year, they're going to say, oh, well, we'll just take over the whole parking lot or do whatever. So, someone who's pushing it too far should not be given the advantage and the benefit that we're talking about now. That only those in strict compliance with all other code issues be permitted to continue their usage for 1 year or whatever the exact date is. But if they're out of compliance, it's like, hey, pick up those plastic tables and bring the cars in. And the parking, I guess that sort of addresses the parking study as well, that, we probably won't need to do that.
Yep.
But just extend it for the 1 year sunset.
And Mayor, I would agree with that. I would agree with that
For
because.
1 year period, and then
And then close it, that's right.
If I might, because I think I requested this item be brought forward because I wanted to normalize these situations, because I think in most cases, my understanding is that there have not been complaints about parking. Maybe there are complaints about noise. I haven't heard about complaints about parking.
I actually was just at a location this past weekend, just kind of checking and talking to people that live in the area, and I won't mention where it is, but they have parking issues, they have noise issues, and so it's impacting that neighborhood.
I had not heard that, and I was specifically focused on parking, not noise, but in any case, what I was hoping to do is normalize this situation, unless there's a particular case where really it is problematic. Maybe the space that's dedicated can be scaled back or whatever, we'll deal with them. But I was hoping to normalize this, rather than have it be just simply, we're not going to enforce. Because there are some very, very nice, Pardis is a good example, where they've done a really nice job, and they're used, they're appreciated by people who, despite the fact that we're, post-COVID, people still like that. And I would like to accommodate that. Basically, probably like where I'm coming from is I think our parking rules are excessive and restrict things that benefit the community. So that's why I brought this forward.
And I appreciate that, council member, and I think that you bring up very good points. I think it's, we need to find a balance between two extremes, which is, one is completely allowing the entire parking lot or whatever area that's been taken over, versus reclaiming all of the parking lots, which we've clearly seen through COVID and its aftermath that we were probably in some of these locations overparked or excessive in the requirements. So I don't know how long the parking studies would take. My question would be, if someone were to, is there a process by which someone wanted to normalize that? They would have to go right now through what, a variance process? They would have to apply for a variance to convert an existing space from one use to another on their own property?
They would have to go through a process very similar to a parking exception. It would depend on the conditions and the circumstances. And really, that's why we're here this afternoon, is to get that direction, how you, council, would like to potentially direct that process.
If I may add, I think part of the problem is, and I didn't understand how this worked, but if a restaurant is using their parking lot as, part of for outdoor dining, they get a permit for valet parking, and so then that allows them to park in the neighborhoods. And
Mr. Mayor, City Council, Council Member Devine, that's half accurate. Parking valet permit doesn't allow the valet company or operator to park just anywhere. they will have to designate
Right.
where they are going to
The
park.
street, well, they have to designate the street?
Not necessarily the street, but it could be another private parking lot that's not, for example, being used at night.
Right. Well, that's kind of what happened with Phoenicia. They moved over to the
exactly.
other side, but we're having problems in our neighborhoods with valet parking, getting permits, and then using the street for valet parking. So that's where another parking issue arises.
But again, if I may, that's actually up to our enforcement, code enforcement, and our parking management that will cite them for that, unless it's identified and designated as valet parking spot. They cannot park on let's say, street parking, if it's not approved by city.
Okay. All right, well, let's try to figure out how we want to move forward on this, because I know that there's at least one more item that we have to hear, and I'm sure there'll be considerable discussion on that as well. Does anyone have a recommendation or a suggestion? I think that Councilmember Devine, you were saying 12 months continuation of the status quo,
Right,
and then start the discussion about sunsetting.
correct.
The current policies?
And in the process, to make sure that there is not only, look at parking issues, noise issues, but also a buffer zone if they're going to be in a residential area, so that they are not creating.
I would tend to support most of that. The buffer zone, I have some questions about, only because I don't want to institute something blanket that that could be used in any other situations, especially in the areas where we already have concerns with residential neighborhoods abutting our commercial areas, which there's very little that we can do to control some of that. Even with a buffer zone, I think it would still cause some issues. I would much rather have it be a matter of looking at each case, and when there is a nuisance type situation, for staff to address that. I know that there's been continuous complaints, at least about one of the locations. Some of the complaints also from some of these locations come from the same individual, where within an entire structure, you may not have other people complaining. So I don't want to institute something that then someone can say, okay, well, council said this now in this other area, much like Phoenicia, where there was a similar issue. They had those types of complaints, and we now haven't heard some of those issues for a long time, and Phoenicia is fairly, well, the city manager's saying maybe we have. Well, maybe they haven't reached my ears. But if there was a different way of enforcing that, I would be inclined to support that. Councilmember Brotman?
Yeah, I just want to say, the whole idea here was to try to legalize and these situations and make sure that they meet code, right? Because people just threw these things up. We don't know that they're safe. We don't know there's ADA. We don't know anything. And so that's why I thought it was important for staff to be able to go work with each of these. It's not a very long list. Work with them, do the parking study, do whatever needs to be done, see what the issues are. Ideally, we can legalize them all unless we find that there's one where really there is spillover parking, and then we'll figure it out, right? But I still think that's the best path for us, is to figure out how to make these either permanent and legal or not. And maybe some of them need structural, work if they put up, posts that don't meet code. And so I don't want to just leave it for another year. I don't think that's really the right way to handle this. And so that's my pitch. I would like a process.
So.
Go
if
ahead,
I could
Councilmember
just
Najarian.
State a general issue. So, the problem is that there's a lot of businesses and restaurants that followed the rules and did not expand into parking lots. Are we gonna penalize them for not doing that and freeze them out and only normalize these ones that did? Or are we gonna open this up to every restaurant in the city? And I think that would cause chaos if we did that, every restaurant to expand into their parking. So we need a bigger plan. City manager?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Member City Council.
Thoughts? I know you want to give us some
like
advice
one
on
of you
this.
mentioned, it's on a case-by-case basis, right? If the establishment cannot have a traffic study conducted and cannot prove that they cannot provide the prerequisite parking requirements, then that will not be allowed and they will not get a permit.
So you would support the parking study?
I would definitely support the parking study, yes.
Required by the restaurant owner.
Yes, yes. Some restaurant owners, smaller restaurants, may not want to expand into their parking, private parking, because of the cost of parking study, let's assume.
So that would be on the road to a normalization like Mr. Brotman talks about. They would need that parking study.
Yes.
I said, forget the parking study, because I was on a few minutes ago saying, let's just go 1 year, and everyone, pulls up their
Yeah.
tent stakes at that point.
Yes, Councilmember, if that's council's direction, we will not, to Councilmember Brotman's question, we will still go after illegal work or unpermitted work and make sure that they either get permits for it or they have to remove unpermitted structures regardless of how long this grace period.
And new applicants would be accepted? Would it be a CUP process, or how would we do that if it's a?
New applicants, well, no, because you are allowing only these 10 or 11 establishments to continue what they had put in place.
So,
Councilmember Devine.
Just let the ones
so
who
we
are already in.
wouldn't be opening it up to the entire city, to all the restaurants in the city. We would just be focusing on these 8.
Well, Councilmember Devine, it depends on the direction we receive.
Right.
If it's
Yes,
just
right.
for temporary 1 year or however period of time, then no, it's only establishments that have already used. Because it won't make sense for them to tear up or install whatever they need to install for 1 year. The
right.
cost is not gonna pencil out.
Well,
I'm switching my mind, changing my mind that if we want to make this a normalization, then a parking study should be required to justify a less than significant impact or whatever the standard is on the neighborhoods.
Most definitely.
is that just for these 8
For
or?
these 8,
Yeah, yes. Okay,
Well,
it's fine with
I
me.
mean, whatever, 10, 8,
10
whatever.
or 10.
right, so based on that direction, Mr. Mayor, members of council, what I'm hearing is that you don't want to open it up to other establishments who may have private parking lots, for example, Carousel, or other restaurants that may want to expand into it.
Let's right now, if these are the 10 that we have that took certain actions to convert their parking lots, let's focus on this for now.
Fortune favors the bold.
Yeah, I suppose. No, that's not to say that we wouldn't consider it for anyone else, right? But I think that if the parking study exercise is a way for normalizing this in certain areas, I'm fine. My concern is that, some of these establishments went overboard in taking over great portions of their parking lots. Whereas I think that we could find a more appropriate halfway point where they can have outdoor spaces, but still allow for some parking on their sites. So that's what if you're saying this, if the study will determine that, I could support it. But my concern is that the study ends up becoming a justification for the space that's already being used.
Correct.
Mr. Galania, City Manager, go ahead.
Yes, if I make a suggestion, Mr. Mayor, based on that direction, I suggest that we come back in a year, the 1 year that you suggested, see how many of the establishments have been able to have a parking study done and have been able to justify or find and identify off-site locations for parking, in which case we have granted them the permit, and how many haven't, and what's been the impact to their operation, and then you can make a decision whether you want to open it up for other establishments or just leave it for those who have been permitted, or provide an alternative direction. But at least in a year, we'll have a good picture of what's been happening and what's been the implications.
And going along, and I would go along with that, but I would also want to see something in the draft, when you bring it back, that says that of those 8, if they have received a certain number of complaints, we're shutting them down.
I would say that if we, depending on the complaints, if it's an amplified sound permit complaint, take away the amplified sound permit, right? Like, I think it should
Okay.
be step-by-step,
All right,
gradual.
that's fine.
I mean,
but
shutting down the whole
but-
operation.
Right, okay, but I just think that we have to have some sort of verbiage to enforce parking, noise, et cetera.
And let's say they're unresolved complaints, because
Yeah.
there can be complaints
Yeah.
that can later be addressed and mitigated. But let's say they're just hanging out there, nothing's been done, no work towards accommodating staff requests and code enforcement. You know, the guys that give you the finger, well, you know.
All right, so I guess we're now moving forward with the parking study, right? Is that?
Requirement.
The
My
parking-
clarifying question I would have, Mayor
Please.
and council members, if we refer back to the report, what we had recommended in there was this would essentially be a phase 1, looking at these existing 11 locations. We would go through this process on the premise that they would be allowed to continue to have these operations if they met our requirements that were established here today, parking study, whatever that may be. And if we set a parameter for those that do not perform up to our expectations, we would ultimately remove that. Subsequently, in the future, we would bring back that discussion, do we want to open this up to more? So the idea behind this, and my apologies, I may not have made that clear during the presentation, is that the phase 1 was to address these 11 locations specifically, give them the opportunity to demonstrate that this is something that could continue to go on.
I would be comfortable with moving forward with the phase 1, having a report back within the year to find out how that has gone forward. You know, some of these staff, being in the food business is a tough business. Not everyone survives, you know, the first year, the first 5 years. So I would say let's revisit that in 12 months. And then after that, we can determine where we want to go as a citywide policy.
I'm good with that.
All right, so someone has to make
So
that
I'll
motion.
I'll move that, how do I need to repeat it? So moved, does that work?
Phase 1 of the, okay. And Councilmember Devine has
Phase
seconded.
1 as described by the
Okay,
mayor.
let's have a roll call vote on this.
Yes, council members Asatryan, Brotman,
Yes.
Divine,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Mayor Kasakian.
Yes, thank you very much. And if we can have someone ask Councilmember Asatryan to join us? Not yet? Okay, next item. Next item, item 2 from the city attorney is being taken off this agenda, off the calendar, and we'll revisit that. Our city attorney was unable to be with us to present this report, so we'll go to item 3. Clerk Abajan, can you please read item 3 into the record?
Yes. Item 3 is Community Services and Parks regarding contract for preparation of design and construction documents for a dog park at parking lot 11, and a feasibility study of a dog park at Palmer Park, Brand Park, and Glendale Community College, Garfield Campus. A, motion authorizing the city manager or a designee to enter into and execute a professional services agreement with RJM Design Group, Inc. in the amount of $275,500 plus a 10% contingency of $27,550 for a total PSA amount not to exceed $303,000 and $1,050 to provide landscape architectural professional services for the design of a dog park at parking lot 11 and to conduct a feasibility study of a dog park at 3 locations: Palmer Park, Grant Park, and Glendale Community College, Garfield Campus. B, resolution of appropriation to appropriate $266,750 in LA County Measure 8 Technical Assistance Program funds to cover costs associated with the design/development of the dog park at Lot 11 and to conduct a feasibility study of a dog park at 3 locations: Palmer Park, Brand Park, and Glendale Community College, Garfield Campus, and shift $40,000 in development impact fees funds from the dog park at Lot 11 project to the feasibility study of a dog park project.
All right, Mr. Galanian?
Yes, Mayor Kasakian, member of City Council. Previously, a couple of years ago, I believe it was you, Mr. Mayor, who had requested staff to look into the possibility of having a dog park in Glendale.
I think multiple council members, both on the council at the time and coming onto the council, had expressed an interest in it, but I was one of many voices.
So in April of last year, previous council, directed staff to move forward with design and cost estimates for parking lot 11 off of Colorado Street. However, later on, Councilmember Sartrian had additionally requested that we look into the potential of having dog parks at Palmer Park.
Again, one
as
of
well as-
many voices and
Right.
various people have been contacted
I'm
by
going through
folks,
the
because I know
motions.
Councilmember Devine was approached, I was approached.
Yes, Councilmember Devine previous to that. So now we have hired a consultant who's ready to start with the design for parking lot 11 based on council's direction. And also staff will be requesting authorization to move forward with a feasibility study of 3 potential sites, additional sites to lot 11. And with that, I'll turn it over to Onik Bulanikian to present more details with a smile for your consideration and direction.
Thank you, Mr. Golamian. Actually, you covered everything, so we can go straight to now.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, good afternoon. Just a quick presentation. Background, as Mr. Golamian mentioned, October of 2021, City Council gave staff direction to evaluate Lot 11, Pelanconi Park in the Glendale Community College Garfield campus for a potential dog park. On January 19th, 2022, we held a virtual meeting with 25 attendees. We talked and mentioned the 3 locations that council directed us to, Lot 11, Pelanconi, and GCC Garfield campus. With Lot 11, most of the participants preferred this location. It was centrally located in South Glendale. Pelanconi Park, we did have some interest, but most of the participants, meeting participants, did not favor this location because it was closer to residential areas and residential single-family homes. And then another site was Glendale Community College. This area is in South Glendale, the Garfield campus. Pretty nice area, about 0.85 acres. But at the time, we were told that they were preparing design documents to build a parking structure. So that location was not of interest during the meeting. February 28th, 2022, staff went to the Parks, Recreation, Community Services Commission, made a presentation, and they approved parking lot number 11 as a site for a dog park and recommended or asked staff to take a report to council for final recommendation. We did so on April 5th. Council approved lot 11 and allocated $350,000 in development impact fees to engage a design consultant for design options and cost estimates for lot 11. And then a couple months after that, on August 9th and October 26th, City Council directed staff to look into Brand Park, south end of the Tea House, as well as Palmer Park Community Garden, taking half of the community garden and building a dog park. We also looked at Glendale Community College. There's some interest in a joint use project. In speaking with the new president, Dr. Corner, he is interested in partnering with the city and opening up the Garfield campus green space area to the public nights and weekends, similar to what we have with Glendale Unified School District at Pacific Edison. So part 1, the design development of parking lot 11. Parking lot 11 is located on Colorado between the National Guard Armory and the Elks Lodge, right across the street from Central Park. Parking lot 11 is, I have the acreage somewhere. Lot size is a little over half an acre, and it's located right by the Armory. Part two, the feasibility study for the dog parks. There's going to be 3 sites that we're going to have the consultant look at. Brand Park, area south of the Tea House, which is 1.1, a little under 1.2 acres. Palmer Park Community Garden area, the entire area is 0.27. We were going to take half of that, so we're looking at 0.3 acres. And GCC Garfield Campus, that's the southwest corner. That entire green space area is 0.85. The small south area will be used for the Child Development Center for their child development courses, and then we're asking to take over the extra green space area for the dog park. So timeline and next steps. Phase 1, if council approves the contract today for the design consultant, we will start on the feasibility study and public outreach and community meetings. Public outreach will include a number of community meetings as well as online survey. The surveys will be done in multiple languages, as well as passing out flyers in the neighborhood, let it be Brand Park area, Palmer Park area, and the Garfield campus. Phase 2, between summer of winter 2023, we will have the summary of feasibility reports, as well as the design and construction documents completed. And then phase 3, spring to winter of 2024, plan check, bid award, and then complete construction, which will be a 6-month timeline. This is for lot 11 only. And depending on the feasibility report, we will come back to council and have council decide on one of 3 facilities to build an additional dog park. Let it be Brand Park, the Garfield campus, as well as Palmer Park. So our recommendation now would be to authorize the professional services agreement with RGM Design Group in the amount of $275,000 plus 10% contingency, not to exceed $303,000, to design the dog park at parking lot number 11, and to conduct a feasibility study for the 3 locations that I mentioned earlier. And then we would like to appropriate $266,000, even though we have $350,000 allocated in DIF funds. Back in July of 2023, we were awarded $285,000 in Measure A funds through LA County for the technical assistance program. These funds can be used for a planning component of a project. So we would like to use $266,000 in LA County Measure A funds instead of a portion of the $350,000 in DIF, and keep the DIF funds for the construction portion of the project. If you have any questions, I'll be
Okay.
more than happy to answer.
Thank
I
you.
also have,
Any callers on this? No?
Do not have any callers.
Mr. Panosin here to answer any questions, and our senior park planner, Joe Gonzalez.
Okay. Councilmember Brotman.
So I just want to run through some of this. So Garfield, you said potentially .3, or no, was that?
0.85.
8.5.
Garfield, .85,
0.85 of an acre.
and lot 11,
Lot 11 is 0.5, little under point, little under, yeah, about
and then the
0.5.
Garfield, though, would only be weekends and evenings?
Nights and weekends, it all depends on the joint use. We can see, depending on the fencing and the availability of the school,
Okay.
possibly nights and weekends. We would like to have it 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., 7 days a week.
Okay, and then the Palmer Community Garden is .3, is that what you said?
Currently, the community garden is 0.27 acres. If we take half of that, we're looking at 0.13
Oh, that's
acres.
teeny tiny, really.
That's teeny tiny.
And is that community garden used?
Yes, all of our plots are full, are being used, so we would need to move around the plots. There is some area that, by the shed that's available, that's open space. We have some room available over there. It's a matter of relocating the plots, and as long as we have ADA accessible for the plot users, that area might be, it'll be a small area, but it might be doable. But
Be
we would
very
wait on the,
small, okay.
we would need to wait on
Yeah.
the feasibility study.
I'm kind of just wondering, I'm wondering whether that's worth it, but with that, but I guess the main question I have is, if we go ahead and do Lot 11, is there really a scenario where we would have multiple dog parks in South Glendale? Is that, so, you know, kind of my sense is like, if we're really going to look at these other ones, and if we're really serious about these other ones, maybe we should make that decision first, because I just don't see us doing multiple ones in South Glendale. The Brand Park one is separate, because it's in such a different location. I can see us, you know, I could see us doing Lot 11 and then still looking at Brand and possibly doing that. But I don't really see us doing Lot 11 and then turning around and saying, we're going to do Garfield also, or we're going to do Palmer. That's kind of how I'm looking at it, so.
Go ahead.
Mayor Kasakian, members of the council, Councilmember Broadman, if Lot 11, if Garfield campus doesn't work out for a dog park, we will still request to have a joint use agreement with Glendale Community College and have that area open for green space for the public to come out and use. So either location, we are basically expanding our green space and open space for the residents. So if council decides to have a dog park at GCC, the residents in the area, I'm sure will be using the GCC campus. Residents in the area for Lot 11, as well as the downtown area, would be using Lot 11. And then if council decides Brand Park, residents in the area would use Brand Park. With the pandemic, we've seen a lot of new dog owners. We get calls on a weekly basis on a number of dogs off leash in our parks. So having multiple dog parks would, I believe, solve the issue of having dogs off leash. It'll
So
give
it's-
the dog owners an outlet to take their dog to an off-leash dog park and have them run around and,
Okay, so it's plausible in your mind that we would do Lot 11 and potentially something at Garfield?
yes, it's up to council, but I would think it'll work out. Whatever we build, we'll see people,
the demand
dog
will be there?
owners
Okay.
taking advantage of the new open space and recreational areas.
Okay.
All right. Go ahead, Councilmember Najarian, Councilmember.
Yeah, I know you guys talked about this. I don't like Lot 11 because it's across from the Armenian Museum. And I think there's just a little bit of, I don't know.
Not the most appropriate location.
I don't think it's
in your opinion?
appropriate for
Okay.
it, but I know it's been voted on,
Okay.
and I'm not intending to ask for a rescission or reconsideration.
I fully understand, Mr. Najarian. Unfortunately, it was one of the few spaces, like we are, every day we get asked, what property does the city own, you know, from whether it's individuals who are in private development or people who have creative ideas of what to do. And so we're becoming very, very limited as we go on with what spaces we do have. Councilmember Al-Satrian and then Councilmember Devine.
What's the timeline for the Garfield campus decisions and how that would look?
When the feasibility report is ready by early summer, we'll come back to council with a report on all three sites.
But it could fall apart, right? Like, it could be that, like, we agree not to move forward, or
Yeah.
GCC agrees, like, or GCC decides that they don't want to do this.
GCC
with
can
us.
decide that they want to do it.
Okay.
They don't want to do it, yes.
Okay.
But I know I had mentioned the possibility of them building a parking structure. That's off the table. They will like to keep that area as a park and eventually open it up to the community so the community can have access to that recreational area.
Mr. Mayor, we're just doing questions now, right?
Sure. Well, we can do questions and comments, but I'll have Councilmember Devine
I
comment,
don't-
and then we can go
thank
back
you.
to you.
Thank you. I don't have any questions. I was just amused at the fact that the design company that the consulting company works with 16 acres and 20 acres and we're looking at 0.3 acres and 0.85. So they're going to have their work cut out for them to try to design on these small spaces. You know, we've been asking for dog parks for years, and finally, we're at least taking a step in the right direction, looking at different sites. So I'm okay with this. I'm not real happy with Lot 11 either, but, you know, it was the only one that we could really find at the time. So hopefully that one will work out. It's half an acre, could be good. But anyway, I'm all for this, and I look forward to hopefully having another dog park besides Lot 11.
All right, do you want to
Sure.
express your thoughts, Councilmember Asatirian?
So I am for Lot 11. I do think that Lot 11 and Garfield or Palmer serve different communities. I think down the line, I want to see the feasibility study, but I think down the line we'll have to figure out which one it would be. And I do agree that Brand Park serves a whole different community. And so I'm excited for this. And I was thinking about bringing Buddy with me today to advocate, but I'm just going to speak on his behalf and say thank you.
Yeah, so I'm good with looking into Garfield. I'm skeptical about Palmer and whether that's even worth looking at. I like looking at Brand. On Lot 11, I also have some, mixed feelings about that, because I think I remember we talked about, where are people going to park if they come there? I think they would have to park somewhere and then cross Colorado, right?
Yeah, Councilmember Brahman, they would park at the Marketplace, either on Elk, Marketplace, Louise, and walk over.
I don't know, it just seems to me kind of, that's a little bit of a downside, I think, to Lot 11, that you're going to have dog owners having to take their dogs over there, crossing a major street possibly. I'm also a little bit skeptical about Lot 11. And if we're going to be looking into Garfield, if that's a possibility, maybe we hold off on Lot. I know you want to do it, but I'm just putting it out there.
No.
I could go either way, but I'm almost thinking, like, do we hold off on Lot 11, see whether Garfield is doable? And yeah, I guess they are different communities that are going to access them. So I'm kind of on the fence about that, but I have some doubts.
Well, Councilmember Brotman, I will make it somewhat easier for you and my colleagues. I can sense that folks are a little lukewarm on the site, and I'll be honest, I am as well. I think we were looking at very specific sites, and we had community outreach, and we had individuals comment on it. Initially, we had looked at a portion of Pelanconi Park that's underutilized because of the configuration. And then since then, I think there's been a lot more interest and a lot more discussion about where we can potentially have dog parks. Palmer Park has been suggested by some of the residents in Adams Hill, or a portion of it. I do agree that could be a very small park. I don't know what. It definitely would not be for any big dogs like Great Danes, maybe for just teacup Chihuahuas or whatever. It would be very limited in size as to what can run around freely there. But I would be also interested in seeing rather than spending the money on Lot 11 here, I would like us to consider what Garfield could potentially look like and focus our funds there. We only have so many dollars to spend. And if there is the possibility of making that a nicer park in an area where, again, it's servicing South Glendale and some of the dog owners, that I think, because it also will potentially have parking too with it on site, maybe something I'd be more interested in. Brand Park, I've had mixed feelings about, because I've had also parents call and complain about, during kids' practices and Little League or whatever else happens up there, that there are dogs off leash. And, right now we're hearing folks saying, well, why isn't Pasadena humane, or why isn't anyone out here enforcing the rules about dogs in parks? But it could potentially work. Again, it would serve a totally different demographic and a group. My priority would be to have a dog park in the southern portion of the city prior to us exploring Brand Park. I know Brand Park attracts a lot of visitors, but if we're talking about servicing the neighborhoods, I think the southern portion of the city would be a priority before we consider Brand Park, or the portion of Brand Park just south of the Tea House. And so that's what my thoughts would be. I know that we went forward with Lot 11. We had discussions. We got very excited about having a dog park. But if we can have that dog park on Garfield, I think that would be a better fit. I also know that currently that lot is being used and it's generating some revenue for the city, is it not?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. And there's been some consideration by some of the automobile dealers to do more in that area. I know that the city manager's office was approached, and there may be some, one of the older established dealerships, I think, may be looking to expand, and we know that the automobile dealerships, the car dealerships are a significant source of the revenue for the city in terms of sales tax. I just don't know, once we spend $300,000 on this design, then the construction of the park is going to cost a significant amount of money. And then all of a sudden, we're going to be caught in a situation like we were before, which is, where do we relocate this? Because there's another economic opportunity right in the heart of our downtown. What do we do? Ideally, I would like us to take over that whole, if we could, in an ideal world, if we could take over the Armory site, right, which is, I think, what we all would love to do, a number of things with the Armory site, then it would make sense possibly to designate some portion of it as a dog park. But in absence of that, to squeeze it in there may not be ideal. So I think that my motion that I would suggest my colleagues to make would be to explore Garfield and to explore Brand, to use the funds that we have here to see if we could design something there and work with the college, and then leave Lot 11 as is for now. Any?
Now, okay, go ahead.
If I may, I would like for Palmer Park to be included in the feasibility study. It is just a study, just in case something goes wrong with Garfield. And if there is consensus, I would love for us to move forward with Lot 11, like I had noted, but if there's consensus from my colleagues that you guys don't want the Lot 11, then I'll join you in that.
Okay.
Okay, so if you want, I can make the motion that we pause on Lot 11, we explore the feasibility of the Garfield campus, we explore the feasibility of that small location on Palmer, and we explore Brand Park.
3 sites.
3 sites, yeah.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we're going to need the funding actually to conduct a feasibility study. So the feasibility, just the feasibility study would cost us a little under $60,000.
Okay,
So we need to allocate those funds.
I'll add that.
If we're not allocating the 303, then we would need to allocate at least $60,000 for the feasibility study.
Okay, so I'll add that to the motion.
I'll second.
Okay.
I'll refer to
Okay,
city
so
attorney.
motion was modified, the modification was, the amendment was accepted, and the second was made. So that was by Councilmember Brotman, seconded by Councilmember Devine. May we have a roll call, please?
Mayor
Yes.
Kasakian, before you move on with that vote, I just wanted to confirm, because there is a resolution of appropriation, that you are modifying this resolution as well, just to designate the amount of funds to support the feasibility
Do we take those separately
studies.
then?
They can be, well, there's a motion and a resolution. You can move those together based on the direction that you've provided. Just wanted to clarify that.
All right, thank you for clarifying it for the record, but is the record clear now? Can we have the roll call?
Yes.
Okay, let's have the roll call vote, please.
Councilmembers Asatryan,
Yes?
Brotman,
Yes.
Divine,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Mayor Kasakian.
Yes, thank you. That is all we have for the special council meeting. Let's entertain now a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second.
All right, the special council meeting is adjourned, and we will wait a few moments before calling to order the city council meeting. Okay, let's have roll call for the city council meeting.
Councilmembers Asatryan,
Here.
Brotman,
Here.
Divine.
Here.
Najarian,
Here.
Mayor Kasakian.
Here. We have one closed session item, and then we're going to add another or 2 closed session items? Just one. One closed session item. So let's have the first closed session item read into the record, and then I'll have one of my colleagues make the motion to add the second one.
A conference with legal counsel pending litigation, Herman Navarrete versus City of Glendale et al., USDC case number 2:22-CV-04372-SK.
All right. And what item would we like to add? Councilmember Najarian?
Mr. Mayor, I move that the city council hereby finds there is an immediate need to take action on an item that arose after the posting of the agenda for the March 7th, 2023 city council meeting. The item in question involves the need to discuss possible resolution of a lawsuit which has been filed and is pending. After posting of the agenda, the city attorney's office determined it may need authority from the council to make and consider offers to resolve the litigation. This discussion and direction to the city attorney must be considered by the council, as the window for possible settlement will likely close, or range of options will be limited if the matter is not discussed between now and the next regular council meeting on March 21st, 2023. The name of the case is unspecified, as same would jeopardize existing settlement negotiations.
All right, is there anyone who would like to second that?
I'll second that.
Or may we have roll call, please?
Yes. Council members Asatryan,
Yes.
Brotman,
Yes.
Divine,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Mayor Kasakian.
Say, yes, and we will now adjourn to closed session.
That would
Or
be
recess.
recess.